This is a podcast which does not shy away from difficult and vulnerable topics, and we ask you to take care of yourselves when you listen. The content is of an adult nature, and we do swear at times.
Welcome to the Autistic Licence podcast. I'm Leo in London.
I'm Shauna, and I'm Carrickfergus in Northern Ireland.
We invite you to listen in on our conversations as we experiment with unmasking in an autistic space. We talk about what it means to discover we're autistic as adults, especially with established careers as therapists. We want people to know that autistic therapists exist and to broaden the conversation about neurodiversity. You're so welcome to join us, whoever you are and wherever in the world you are. We hope you'll find something of interest and connection here.
Good evening. Nice to see you.
Hello.
Hi there. Can you hear us okay? Leo talk? Yeah.
Hello.
Okay.
Hello.
Thank you so much for reaching out and agreeing to speak with us. Meaghan Ray. So I'm Shauna. This is Leo. You will maybe know our voices, but to do it in real time.
Well, when you contacted us, I mean, that was I read the email, and there's so much fascinating stuff there to dig into. Is there, what do you want other people to know about you, just right at the top level, to say hi?
I live in Canada. I am a parent of a 4.5-year-old kiddo, and I have a partner, my husband. We've been together since I was 19, and I'm now 36. So many years. And I'm also a physiotherapist. I've been a physio since 2014. And I'm now a PhD student studying rehabilitation science. I've been in lots of different work environments and home environments over the last 10 or so years, and they've all felt very different in different ways to me. And I've only recently discovered or self-identified as autistic just since last March, April, kind of figured it out. So my autistic identity is the newest part of my identity. But because the rest of my identity was fairly solid, I guess, I kind of, was fairly consistent with everything else. I only had to focus on that. Like I could just focus on the new autistic part of myself, how that overlapped and changed the rest of my identity and my life and my perception of who I am in all these different areas of my life and how it all fits together and what works best for me and why. So that's been my last year pretty much while I've been doing my PhD work and parenting and all that. I've been really immersed in the autistic side of who I am, and that's how I found you guys. Yeah.
Thank you. It's an interesting take on it that you have, that it's like the other things were quite consistent, and then the way you present it is that you then had the space to look at this and almost dialogue with yourself about all of these different parts of the same, and it's refreshing to hear your way of seeing that, because it's so different for different people. Some people, things are not settled, and and it depends when it comes along whether they, it's just, we're all so different in how we tell the story of how that fits in.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, the unsettledness of their life is a lot of what leads them to figuring out that they're autistic, because that's kind of the missing piece, or the explanation for why their life isn't working, the way they're told it should. And for me, I definitely had struggles in clinical work. As a physio, I worked mostly in a hospital for about 6 years. And so I definitely struggled with that environment and struggled with burnout, but I already knew I was introverted and non-binary, and just that, and I already knew I had a low social battery, and that environment would be challenging for me. So I went into that work plan with the idea of getting as much clinical experience as I could, as quickly as I could, knowing that would be very challenging for me. It was very challenging, but for more reasons than I realized at the time. And then I transitioned out of that environment to the academic environment, which was my original plan to begin with anyway. And that's much easier for me to manage. And I really enjoy that environment. And so because I had these other explanations for why the things I had struggled with were going to be struggles anyway, I didn't need to find the explanation for it the way I think a lot of people do. I had enough other reasons that I might struggle with those things. So it actually took being exposed to a fellow grad student who is autistic and does research with autistic students, people with racialized experience, and how that overlaps. And hearing her talk about her research and her perspectives on being autistic and autism in general, I really opened my mind and my awareness of just being like, that's me. I could participate in your research because that sounds exactly like me. The first day where we were in class together, she had a lesbian flag sticker on her computer, and she was new to the program and I wasn't. And so at our first break, I went up to her and said, hey, I saw your flag sticker. I'm also queer. I do queer and trans research. We should be friends. And we were friends from then on. But immediately, because of the way I introduced myself,
I was just going to say, what a lovely, direct, literal we should be friends because we clearly have this in common. Yes. That's beautifully autistic. It
was really funny. And so like talking back over that with her, it was just like, she knew right away that I was autistic, and she found it funny that I hadn't included that in my introduction to her. So it took her a bit to realize that I didn't know that yet. Yes. And then as I was figuring it out, she was like, yes, here's some resources. Keep going. So as I was like exploring it and, taking the online tests and seeing what those told me, and reading about people's experiences and listening to podcasts and seeing what resonated with me with that stuff, I would always go back to her and like text her and be like, this cool thing, this sounds totally like me. Do you do that too? Does that sound like you, or not at all? She's also ADHD and I don't have ADHD. So we have a different experience of autism because of that as well. And so that's been really fascinating. And I also have other friends who have ADHD but are not autistic. So I kind of have the spectrum of like what that looks like, each one looks like on its own, and how they look overlapped in people. And so that was a really interesting part of me exploring being autistic, being able to compare it to friends with various types of neurodivergence and just chatting about what our similar and different experiences are with all the aspects of it.
What's wonderful there, or how I heard it anyway, is that you kind of had a mentor, an autistic mentor. So a lot of what you were saying is resonant to me, especially about kind of big changes of identity happening and then them being properly settled and then going, okay, well, I guess for me, it was that I've always, all my adult life, it's been a bit of suspicion in my head that that's part of who I am. But I think I'd never thought of it in the terms that you put it, that all those other things had to be solidified really first. And also, I wonder if for many people who kind of experience that journey that way round, then actually come to, well, I think you said something similar, actually, Meaghan Ray, that I've sorted all these things out. These are all discomforts that I had, and now I understand why, and they're all in place now, and I feel very confident about them. I think you said, why is this still not working? And that for me, certainly, that was the final, I can't say jigsaw piece puzzle, can I? Because that's got connotations, but yes. piece of the puzzle. And there was something else that I was going to say at the end of that. Yeah, that mentor thing. So for me, and I think a lot of people that I speak to, when I'm on that journey, I'm doing all that research stuff and listening to people's voices and identifying with things in Facebook groups that people are saying, going, oh yeah, I never thought that's probably an autistic thing. But you actually were able to do that outwardly and say to somebody, oh, I've just discovered this thing. That's the mentor part of it, kind of, that feels really magical. I would love to have had that earlier on. I've got loads of it now, but you know what I mean? That sounds really magical to have that.
I'm very much a verbal processor, and like a communal processor. So like I can do a bunch of introspection and like figuring things out on my own, and that gets me like 50 to 75% of the way there. But I cannot get a full, like, comfortable understanding of how, like, and I think it's the application part of it, like how I have this information and understanding of myself, but how does that matter to me? How is it gonna affect my day to day? How do I enact that? How do I embody it? How do I experience it? And how does that differ? And I think that the part that I really need to understand that part of it, or kind of experience it, is how does that compare and differ from other people? So I need to be able to have conversations and communal experiences with people, have community, in order to get that like practical element of the understanding. And without that sharing with other people, podcasts are a bit better than just like reading something on the internet, because I can hear other people's experiences, especially something like yours where it's just a conversation that's very organic and it's like real life experiences as opposed to information on a topic. That's very different. So the real life just chatting kind of gives me some of that, but it's only one way, right? So needing to be able to have a friend or a person that I can just say, I looked this thing up and I tried it and here's how it felt to me. I think this is how I've been doing it up until now. Does that sound like you? Does that sound different? What do you do? All of that is really, really important for that last bit of understanding that is the practical part of it, the doing of being autistic, I guess.
It's making me think about how, like, if that could somehow be facilitated and set up for more people to have that, like, people don't need, like, referred into therapy or referred to, like, a lot of people don't like groups, but people are, released from their assessment interview, if you like, with something to read. And it's not, if you hadn't have come across that person, and I love that you're giving this credit to her and you're naming her, because she was really foundational for you in your journey. But if you hadn't found her, life would have been different. And for so many people, they self-identify through the internet, through whatever. They may get diagnosis, but then what? Then they have to go through some kind of medicalized or formalized or therapeutic journey to try and get that. When I find some way of matching people up just for the normal everyday, this is me, this is you. Is it like
Well, I think part of that for me is that I will seek that out if I don't have it.
I hear that in you.
I will go and find someone.
Yes, and not everybody has that, but I really hear that in you.
Yeah, and I think that comes from a couple places. One of which is being queer from a fairly young age. I knew I was queer in grade like 9, 10. Like before I started dating anyone, I came out to my parents. So I grew up in a very liberal kind of family and liberal environment. And so sexuality wise, I knew I was queer from a young age. Gender wise, I had some experience in high school, but then like had no language for it, no ability to understand it. So I kind of made it work for me and put it away and didn't think about it. And that was very similar to, like, I looked up what Asperger's was and what autism was when I took an abnormal psychology course university level course when I was in my last year of high school, because I was so interested in it. Like I knew much earlier than I actually had the words for. And I put that away as well, because I was like, okay, this is really cool, but does it apply to me? I don't know.
You didn't need it at that time. You needed some other things.
Yeah. So, but I did learn the importance of community through the queer experiences that I had. And I knew when I went to university that I had to seek out a queer community. And I picked a university that had a student queer organization because of that. So I have actively sought that every time I've moved or like changed environments. I've sought a queer community for myself and friendships around that. And I think that has taught me that that's really important to me. So as soon as I started looking up autistic things, I solidified an autistic community and friendship and relationships with others, because I know that that's so important to me. And I think the other part is being a clinician. When you're a clinician, you learn independent awareness of the information that you're missing and how to find that information and the drive to go get it and then assimilate it. Like those are professional clinical skills that all clinicians have to have and develop. And so I think they are really intertwined, and they both really benefited me in my carrying through on my autistic journey.
Yes. And that really fits with the thing that you said as well about, you knew you were an introvert, you knew what you needed in the hospital environment. Like you knew yourself well enough to go, okay, I know this. How do I take that information and do what I need for myself to get myself through to the other side of this? And that's what comes across with you, with everything, like finding the community, finding the career path. But if you hadn't done that, and lots of people don't have the skills to do that, that's when you would flounder, because the world isn't made for you for any of us, but you had to really, like, there's such a self-sufficiency, self-advocacy within you that was able to do that.
I think from my experiences chatting with friends especially people where we've ended up in a similar place in terms of identity and profession and that kind of thing, but we've come from very different childhood backgrounds and experiences. I think the difference for me is that I had a very solid childhood. Yes. I have no experiences of childhood trauma.
Yes.
I had a family that I fit in with really well. My parents structured my childhood in a way that worked for me really well, in terms of having my own space, having downtime. They're very academically minded. We had academic and political discussions at the dinner table regularly. So I developed all those skills. And it was catered towards, you want to learn this new thing? Go ahead. Here's all the resources you need to learn this new thing. So I could follow my special interests if I wanted to. And it was never, I still learned high masking because of being raised female, especially, I think. But I was raised in an environment that was very appropriate for me. And I gained a lot of self-confidence and self-efficacy because of that. Self-assuredness, and social confidence. I always say I'm a socially confident introvert.
And you can be.
I love talking to people. I'm happy to go out and talk to people and meet new people and bond with them, have a good conversation about a common interest. But I can't do that more than once a week, if that. I need lots of time in between, and that cannot last for more than 2 hours, and it can't be 5 people at once, and it can't be 5 people in a row.
But you know all this.
Yes,
and
I
know all this from an early age. And it's really, I think that, for your parents to have given that to you, what a gift. And I don't know that I've ever met an autistic person who can say that. I really don't. I think it's a rare gift, and it really is a testimony to how, if you have that from your primary caregivers, and it kind of that gives you what you need. You were always going to go out into the world and find out you were different, and have to navigate that, but you had the home security, the security.
And I think the interesting part for me is that they didn't have to be autistic based. They didn't have to identify identify me as being autistic.
Yeah.
I didn't need to know that. I still learned masking strategies that I probably wouldn't have needed had they known I was autistic and had the skills to manage that, to support that. So the main part of my like autistic journey has been learning who I am without masking. And that's been strange, because it was so built in that I didn't know what stimming was. I didn't know what stimming would feel comfortable to me. I did not have any natural stims. I had to learn how to stim because that was so trained out of me so hard to sit still. So
sit still. That's what. Okay.
And not flap my hands and not make extra noise. And I think it's partly because my mom is likely also autistic. It's genetic. And knowing the types of things that she controlled in my behavior, those are the things that I have had to work on not controlling in my kids' behavior because they are irritating to me sensorily. So knowing that that's the dynamic that I have with my kid, his echolalia is hard for me to manage for my sensory overload. And I have had to learn strategies as a parent to not censor and teach him to constantly mask the way I think I was taught, because if I was doing that, it would have been irritating to my parents, especially my mom. So that's the autistic part of it wasn't there, but I didn't need it in order to develop the self-efficacy that I then was able to use to do my own autistic discovery journey comfortably. Does that make sense?
It really makes sense. Yeah. It really
it was a non-traumatic non-autistic childhood, but not in a traumatic way. It was still supportive in so many ways that it was still safe and supportive in development.
I'm so excited by how you're talking about that, and it is firing up my ADHD kind of enthusiasm parts that are saying, okay, so what an incredible gift that you then get to give as a parent to your child. But I'm also though thinking is how can we bottle this? How can we formulate something to tell everybody about that children can have some of what you had in that non-traumatic, open, nurturing, not necessarily autistic, but just parenting.
Yeah, I think the closest thing is the positive parenting, or it's just like child first parenting. You follow the child's needs. You're sensitive to the child's needs. If they seem to need more downtime, then you structure your day to give them extra downtime. If they are constantly dysregulated when they come home from school, then you don't expect them to be doing their homework or, their music practice or whatever other high demand activity you have for them in the evening immediately when they come home. So you just kind of follow what they need and believe your child's behavior is trying to tell you something and isn't there to be manipulative. Children are not naturally manipulative. All they need is care and recognition and comfort and security and support. And then their behavior will show you what they need. And they will push against the boundaries, not because they're being mean or they want to act out, but because they need to know those boundaries are solid. They need to know where those boundaries are and that they will stay consistent. And that's what gives them that sense of security. And different kids will need to do that pushing against the boundaries more often and more strongly because they have more chaos internally, or because their system does not match with the world around them as easily. So they need to make sure that those boundaries within the home and within the family are still there and are still comfortable and consistent, because when they're out in the world, they're not comfortable and consistent. So I think that's why we see that kind of dysregulation and boundary pushing within, for neurodivergent kids against their parents. They have neurodivergent meltdowns just because of their internal experience, but they also tend to be more behavioral, be labeled as resistant and so on in terms of pushing against parental boundaries, because they need that the reinforcement that there's something consistent and predictable much more often than neurotypical kids will. So anyway, I have a whole bunch of theories around parenting and parenting neurodivergent kids and I don't know if my kiddo is neurodivergent. He might not be. It's likely he is.
Yes.
Genetically, he is my genetic child. So likely some, to some degree, but he presents a lot like me. He's hyperverbal. He has a lot of echolalia to some degree, but he already knows how to mask it at daycare. He masks it constantly when he's out. And only recently, like maybe when he would turn 4, just after 4, he had a week where he was constant. All of a sudden, it's like he realized that he didn't need to be turning that off when he was at home. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, he started doing echolalia constantly at home, literally constant noise. Mm-hmm. And it came out of nowhere. We were like, what is this? It was a little bit before that, but all of a sudden it was constant, and it was shocking to both me and my husband. and we were like, what? Where did this come from? And what is this? And I recognized it as echolalia right away. So it's like interesting that it's just like suddenly showed up to, or ramped up to, 100%. And we chatted with him and whatever. And he's like, oh yeah, I don't like, do you do this all the time at daycare? Like, no. Like it's too noisy. There's other people around. I don't want to bother them. And then we said, like, is this happening in your head all the time? Like, even when you're outside, is this what the inside of your head sounds like? And he's like, yeah, like it's always like this. And I'm like, what? So you've had 4 years of your life, and the inside of your brain has sounded like this the whole time. And you've only just learned that it's okay to let that out at home.
For you to know how to interrogate that and ask those questions in a way that is absolutely going to make sense, and
to help him to express something.
Yes.
And even like you saying that, what he expressed to you and you're sharing right now is making me think, I'm like that. He's helping me understand myself. Because the more that I organically unmask, my echolalia is more and more and more evident. And when you just said that, is that what your hair's like? I'm going, yes, my hair's like that too. It's like the girl in me.
Yeah.
To say that, and not because you're so.
We're getting some sneaky ninja parenting.
Releases that to be allowed to be said, and it's so stimmy. Like, it's so good, so nice. It feels so nice to do it. But then I'm also thinking, like, for your son, and I'm thinking then, my mind is holding on still on what you said about the stimming at home, and then that coming out. And so now I'm connecting these things together and going, like, stimming is so enjoyable, and it's also can be like a stress response. And so when you were talking, I was thinking maybe the reason why it wasn't so traumatic was because you didn't need it as a stress response either. It could have been enjoyable, but you didn't absolutely need it for coping because your environment was helping you to cope anyway. And then you're now talking about your son getting to do it now on the holidays, and it's enjoyable, and it's probably some kind of release because he's held it in for at daycare, which is the double use of stimming,
we absolutely, now that he's comfortable with it and he knows he can do it whenever he wants to at home, and it's just like the volume or the suddenness or the constancy that's an issue. Like, if we're trying to have a conversation and he is making constant loud noise, that's an interference, and we try to negotiate that in a way that doesn't tell him what he's doing is wrong. It just needs to be modified. So we try to kind of talk him through that without just telling him no, not right now, or in a different room, or a little bit quieter, or pause for a second, or something like that. But it definitely has he does it a lot more after coming home, and then it tapers off in the evening until he starts getting tired, and then it starts coming back up again. But when you were saying that like it can be a stress response or a positive thing, like an enjoyable thing, from one of the hardest or most frustrating parts of exploring being autistic for me is that I know there are things that I enjoy intensely, but I can't access that because of and I don't know if it's because of masking or because I've been told for so long that that's not something that people should be fascinated with or something like that. Or just the like capitalistic, like it's not productive to just sit and stare at rainbow shimmer Ray lights or sit and stare at a waterfall for as long as you want to. That's not productive. Use your time better. You know, that kind of thing is just so, so anytime I'm just sitting and enjoying sensory experience, I automatically have a you're being lazy kind of guilt experience at the same time. And I have not yet been able to separate those two for most of the time. There's an occasional time where I have purposely set aside, this is my afternoon to just do what I want. And if I can just go paint or go do something else, hang out with Mika, my autistic mentor friend. Like, we went to the Mootart Gardens here in Edmonton, and it's a botanical garden. It's an indoor garden, and they have 4 different sections with different climates. And so we went between them and we just sat, and then we found our favorite spot to sit that we both enjoyed the most, and just listened to the waterfall noise and chatted in amongst all these amazing tropical plants and trees. And like, that was my afternoon to do that. So I allowed myself to just enjoy it, and it makes such a big difference. But I can't access that in the glimmer sort of way, because I part of my masking is to turn that off, because I do not have time to indulge that. Yeah. So I don't want to hear about it, because then I have that tension of, I want to be doing this, but I can't. So I have learned how to turn off the sense of glimmers so that it's not telling me about something that I could be enjoying right now that I can't do. Does that make sense? And it's sad and frustrating that that's the direction that I've had to go with it. And I'm trying to recapture that sense of glimmer and enjoyment, because it can be so intense and so positive, but it's so hard to find a way to do that doesn't trigger my automatic guilt and ignore that, it's going to distract you, you know.
Yes, and whenever it's another way in which some of that nervous system stuff could maybe be adapted or taught through a more neuroaffirming lens. So the whole concept of glimmers, like, that kind of came out of Bev Dana's polyvagal stuff. And I remember when I did an experiential training with her for a year when we were doing glimmers, you know, she was talking about how just allow a little bit of it, and then it might get overwhelming, but you can just close it down. And I was going, this doesn't work for neurodivergent people. We can't do that. Obviously, neurotypical people can. And that's why the idea of glimmers works for them, because they can access just a glimmer. We can't. We either get the all in, or it's not even worth opening the door.
Yes.
That's not understood in the way that some of this is taught or written about. And so then we lose something, you know, and then there is a very real sense of either a disappointment that we can't go there, or else just monotropic, you know, immersion or overwhelm. You know, there's also a very real thing of, this is just too much for me. Like, too much excitement, too much joy, too much, you know, can't be doing with that now. I actually just can't, because I have to be doing something else, as you said, or because of all that scripting, which, you know, we swim in our world, all that stuff. So there's so much in what you're saying, but it's frustrating that we miss out, because we know as well that we've got access to something with our autistic ways of being that just needs different wording and different ways and different permissions, different techniques, I don't know, to be able to access.
Hello, Shauna here, recording after the event. You probably want more, and that is good, because this conversation was so rich. There was so much that we have decided to stop here for this episode, and then release another one as soon as we can, in a few days hopefully, which will be the second half of our conversation with Meaghan Ray. Thank you, lovely listeners, for being here with us, spending time with us, listening. We would love to hear from you, as always. If you want to come on and talk to us as a guest, let us know that too. We'd love to hear from you.
Thank you for listening to the Autistic License podcast. You can connect with us via Instagram, Facebook at autisticlicense.com, or by email at autisticlicense@gmail.com. And we spell license the British way, LICENCE. We also have a thriving Facebook community. Search for Autistic License Shauna and Leo, or click on the link in the show notes.